Hi everyone, welcome to Factual Fridays. I'm Arjun from the Factual.
And I'm Jill.
Thanks very much for joining us. As we do every week, we go over the different angles on some of the most pressing topics in the news, try to see it from the political left and right to understand the full story, and so you can draw your own conclusions. So what should we talk about?
Well, Ukraine is dominating the headlines. Maybe a good place to start is kind of how it's affecting us here at home. Yesterday, it cost me $6 a gallon to fill up my car.
Oh, yeah, that's bad. I think California has the highest per gallon rate at this point, but it's all over the country. It's bad.
Yeah, it's going up everywhere. But so why, right? I mean, that's, I think, the real question. Biden has decided to ban Russian oil. He just made that decision. The gas that we're buying was purchased a while ago. Why are the gas prices going up? Why is it affecting us?
Yeah, and once again, a complicated topic. So, as you rightly said, the United States only imports about 3% of its oil from Russia. So you think that goes offline. Why is it causing such a big deal? So there's an article in the New York Times or actually CBS News that does a very good job of this. And what it says is that when the U.S. imposes sanctions on Russia and says, we're not going to take your oil, then one of the side effects is also that countries that trade with the United States have to comply with sanctions. Because if you want to be a U.S. trading partner, you can't violate what the U.S. is doing with other countries. It's kind of like no one can trade with Iran if they want to trade with the United States. Right. Suddenly, all these countries around the world are like, oh, wait a minute, so we can't get Russian oil too. And Russian oil overall makes up 10% of the world output. So it's not 3% of U.S. that's going offline, it's potentially 10% of world that is going offline. So that's where it's a much bigger shock. And then prices today don't reflect just the oil today. There's a complex calculation of what we have in reserves, what we expect supply to be in the future, what we expect demand to be, and then somehow, somewhere, the market is figuring out that, okay, demand is really roaring back. People are going back to work, they're commuting. So pandemic is mostly over in most places, and supply is getting crunched. There's this Russian issue there, so put two together, and lo and behold, prices are going to go up.
So you don't think it's just the gas companies basically trying to gouge us because it's a good story, right? Biden, our government's doing the right thing and they're supporting Ukraine, but we're all going to have to hunker down and pay for it.
Yeah. I suspect that the oil companies are going to have record profits, at least on a unit cost basis. I don't know if volume-wise some of it will drop. I think a lot of people are making decisions to drive less. I mean, it's bad. Yeah. So, that dampens demand down a little bit, which will affect them. The other part of this discussion that comes up a lot is it's all Biden's fault or the Biden administration for not making the United States more energy independent. Right. They canceled the Keystone XL pipeline. That's a big reason for it. When President Trump was in charge, the United States was a net energy exporter. And look, that's all gone backwards. And so there's an article in the New York Times that's highly rated by the Factual where it goes into the details and says, actually, in the first year of Biden's presidency, he's approved, I think, 34% more leases for oil and gas exploration than Trump has.
Really?
Yeah. So he's actually not so hardcore. Even though it's all about the transition to clean energy, he's actually been fairly bullish on that, or at least aggressive on that. And the Keystone XL pipeline, I think only like 8% of it has been built. So had they even said yes, it wouldn't affect capacity immediately. Now, of course, you could still argue that, yes, but it's all supply and demand and future projections. So if they knew it was going to come on even in 2023 or 2024, maybe they would be more easy on going into the reserves versus now they're like, we don't know if it's coming. So I don't think it's so easy an answer, but I also don't think it's a glib answer like it's Biden's fault. I think this one has a lot to do with demand roaring back, with the supply shocks, with the effect of the sanctions affecting all these other countries. The U.S. is trying to rekindle a relationship with Venezuela to import Venezuelan oil, which actually used to be a big chunk of U.S. oil imports back in the 2000s. It's a huge oil-producing country, very close to the United States. Arguably, that actually might be a good thing if the U.S. starts to import there. And then as far as like true energy independence of the United States, that's also complicated. Another question that comes up is, if we are net exporters, why do we still import?
Why do we still import?
I had to read up on that too. I was like, yeah, actually, that is a really good question. Why? And so that turns out that we import certain types of crude oil and then refine and then export different types. So you might import heavy and refine to get light, or vice versa, I think. And sometimes we don't have the refining capacity, so we might export something to just re-import it back after it's been refined elsewhere.
Right.
So it's not always just a quantity game. It has to do a lot with refining capacity. So yeah, net, again, I don't think it's so easy to blame any president, whether it's Biden or Trump, necessarily for the situation we are in now. But it sure seems like all countries, specifically Germany, have really got the, oh my God, we need to be energy independent as best we can, because if we are beholden to autocratic countries like Russia, this is what can happen. They've got a gun over us. So I think very tough lesson for a lot of countries to have learned now.
I guess the other question is, okay, so oil sanctions, especially U.S., whether it's 2%, 10% is a little bit more impactful, but is that really going to make the impact and make it quickly on Putin, right, to get him to stop this crazy war that's happening? Or should we be doing something else, right? Zelensky's been asking for a no-fly zone.
Yeah.
There's this question of, Poland sending planes.
Right. Such a difficult issue, and members of Congress are fiercely arguing on both sides. There are people that you can play the bleeding heart thing, rightly so. You're seeing a maternity hospital get bombed. What are you waiting for?
Right. Where's the line?
Yeah.
Right?
So where's the line?
We're saying, okay, that's a war crime, but if we're not going to do anything about it?
Yeah. No, it's understandable. And so I think here it really all boils down to the threat of nuclear war. That's really what's holding everyone back. So if you say you're going to do a no-fly zone, someone has to enforce a no-fly zone. You have to fly planes to enforce it. Who's going to do that? It's unclear if the Ukrainian military could do it. So now NATO is doing it. US forces are doing it. And if you do that, invariably they're going to engage with Russian MiGs and shoot each other down and shoot down their artillery. That's a full war. This is no longer Russia-Ukraine. This is now full war. So the calculus is, okay, we do that. Putin's made very clear, you will see a retaliation like none other in the history of man. Not such coded language for nuclear war.
Right. But will he?
Can we risk it? I think that's everyone's asking. And then you and I were talking about this earlier before we started, that there was this tweet thread from the former Russian foreign minister. Right. This is back, I think, post Yeltsin, maybe? Or
I think
maybe
he was Yeltsin's foreign minister.
He was Yeltsin, yeah. And so he basically said that Putin is actually a rational actor. And he sort of goes through the 3 points on why Putin invaded Ukraine, and very rational, like it wasn't a crazy moment. He had sort of thinking it through since 2014 or actually before that, when the Ukrainian, that Maidan, the revolution happened, right?
Yeah. He's clearly planned for it.
Yeah. And so there is truth to the fact that he thinks that their histories are intertwined and all this stuff, but there's also the fact that he's seen the West interfere with Ukraine, in his view, for nearly a decade, and it's getting worse in his eyes. He's like, our peoples are tied, these Western people are blowing things up, and I've seen firsthand lots of people upset at what's going on, particularly in eastern Ukraine. So it was a rational act. All of which is to say that if he is a rational actor, he's not going to use nukes. I mean, that guy knows better than me, so, I'd like to believe so. But if you're sitting in the White House or in NATO Council, I mean, it's still a hell of a gamble.
Well, but who's to say also that he's going to stop if he's successful here, right? And he gets control of Ukraine. Who's to say he's going to stop there? He will eventually get there, I think.
And I think your view is the prevailing viewpoint, that he is not going to stop here. I think people say Moldova would go next. Belarus is effectively his. Lukashenko is basically his guy. So it's not going to stop necessarily. Which is why a lot of the articles and analysis that we're now showing at the Factual is about what is an off-ramp for Putin. How can he save face and get out of this without further escalation? And it's not going to be a palatable answer, because it's not, one side's going to look a little weak no matter how you play it, but we've got to give him a way to get out without looking like a complete loser and complete loss of his force, because then he'll just backed into a corner. Who knows what he's going to do? So the one that I've seen is are the breakaway republics of the Eastern Ukrainian, of Eastern Ukraine, can they be established as some sort of special administrative region of some kind with joint governance around it? I mean, those people are heavily Russian speaking. They do have some pro-Russian sentiments, or some people, I don't know what fraction, if it's a majority or not. Could they have some sort of thing like that? And it allows him to say, look, that was the people that were always complaining, so we've gotten this out of it. Of course, Ukrainians would not be happy with that largely, but if it means the war stops, maybe.
And then does he
Does he
just
stop after that?
get off scot-free on all these war crimes?
No, it sounds to me like he's going to. The war crimes one's difficult because I guess you'd have to prosecute him in The Hague in the Netherlands, and it's unlikely that he'd ever go there willingly. And I don't think there's any extradition treaty, so I don't think he'd ever face it, unfortunately. But the sanctions are likely to be in place for a long time. I don't think this is going away, or maybe some of it goes away as part of this face-saving thing. Who knows? But I think the Russian economy has taken a real hit. I imagine any company doing business there is going to be very, very cautious about how much they can rely on anything. Why would you invest when you know it could all go away tomorrow? So I think it's going to have a long shadow. It's going to cast a long shadow on the Russian economy, on Russian people, even if he can save face. And so ultimately, if his economy is so much in tatters that he doesn't have the money to buy and build the things he needs and pay his forces, maybe that's ultimately the way that his aggression stops. He just can't pay for anything anymore. I don't know.
Maybe.
Problem is that China still imports a lot from him and funds him pretty well. So there'll always be some partners, but no doubt, if Western Europe goes offline from any of his exports, it is going to hurt. If the UK is now really trying to clamp down on these shell corporations and money laundering of Russian entities and oligarchs through there, that's also going to put a crimp in things.
But the question is how much, right? I mean, the oligarchs, right? They've got nothing if Putin's not in power. They have a vested interest in him staying in power, so they're going to continue to support him and do whatever they need to, right?
Yeah, but if all their assets are frozen, if they can't do anything, like Roman Abramovich, who's the famous owner of the Chelsea Football Club's been seized from him. He can't do anything. His accounts are frozen. I think that's going to have a collective impact of, okay, we can't do any of the things we just overnight,
Depending on how much of that we're actually, like the rest of the world is actually able to find and control and so forth. I mean, because even if it, impacts some of their wealth.
Switzerland came out famously now and said, we're not going to be neutral in this. So there'll be places, I don't know, Cyprus, who knows?
I'm sure they've got hidden accounts and whatever, who knows, right?
But I do think that collectively it is having a real impact. Like there's no question that, if you're a Russian oligarch, you want to live in sort of an industrialized, safe-ish sort of country. And if most of those are closing down and are not really going to let you even keep money in and out, like you can't go to a bank machine easily, at some point it does become really hard, the life. And so I think collectively it's going to have an impact. I just, like you said, I don't know how soon.
Right, how soon, and so what does it mean for them? It's not like they have another option, right?
His foreign exchange reserves are at the highest it's been in 20 years. He's got a long way to burn through that. Yeah.
And, the Russian people are being told, this is the West's fault, right?
Yeah. So that, I think, is another really interesting thing. This, what is the Russian support for the war? And so there was a survey that was run by a supposedly reputable research firm and was checked by a U.S. researcher, and then the Washington Post ran an article on it. And it said that 58% of Russians support the war, which might surprise a lot of people that are listening. It's like, wait, what? And then what was really good is that they stratified it by age. And what they showed is that the younger population was actually heavily against the war. I think it was like only a third of people supported it, 2/3 were against it. And as you got to the older population, they were the ones where it was sort of like 75% supported it. And then the same urban-rural split.
Yep.
Urban centers largely against, rural for. So it begs the question, like, why? Why are these older folks or rural folks supporting it? And it turns out that many of them get all their news from television. They're not on the internet. And so they largely watch state media.
Yep.
And state media tells them that they are actually the liberators, the freedom fighters. And so it's understandable, if you're in your 70s, you've grown up with this, and that's your media outlet. So it's so fascinating to me that media has such a powerful force here, and is, if we're saying that to end this war, you have to control the hearts and minds of people, or win the hearts and minds of people, well, it's going to be very tough when we don't have access to, like, they've thrown out all U.S. media once we banned them, which is, why that ban was debatable, but that's where it's come from. I thought that was actually very interesting.
Yeah, and I don't know how you turn that around.
The nice thing is that, people are still able to get information in and out of the country. So VPNs are still working and people are able to get information. It's just not getting to the right people.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know if at some point that gets loosened somewhere or gets out more. I imagine, Russia's a big country, 80 million plus people. If enough of them are hammered by the economic issues, they are a much larger force than the government is. Maybe they all just stand up and say, enough is enough, there's a disaster. So, yeah, no good scenarios here, but watchful. Yeah, it's lots to catch up on.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, I just guess we're just watching and waiting to see what happens. I don't know what the path out of this is.
Yeah. I'm thinking, I'm sure that people are working on off-ramps and face-saving scenarios. Because otherwise it just goes on and on. He can hold out for a very long time. That's my word.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. We know he's got money. He's fine.
Yeah.
Right. He's protected.
Yeah. So he'll just keep going and going.
Yeah, it's not clear if he cares beyond that, right?
Yeah. So hopefully this time next week we have some slightly better news.
Yeah.
Hopefully there's some peace talks, some ceasefire. Any of the above will be a welcome change from this.
But we'll keep tracking it.
Yeah.
We'll be back here next week.
That's it. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you next week.